The auctioneer's voice cut through the howling wind like a knife through butter, and Felicity Carson knew with absolute certainty that her life had reached its darkest hour. She stood on that wooden platform in Miles City, Montana, shivering so violently her teeth chattered, while snow fell so thick she could barely see the handful of men gathered below. The winter of 1882 had brought the worst blizzard anyone could remember, and somehow, impossibly, her stepfather had decided this was the perfect time to rid himself of the burden she represented. "Gentlemen, we have here a healthy young woman, 20 years old, good with cooking and cleaning," the auctioneer barked, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Starting bid is $50. Felicity wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stand there like livestock being evaluated. But where would she go? The temperature had dropped so low that 3 people had already frozen to death in the streets this week. Her thin dress offered no protection against the elements, and her hands had gone numb an hour ago. She focused on a spot in the distance, trying to pretend this was happening to someone else. $50, a gruff voice called out. Felicity didn't look to see who had spoken. 60, another man countered. The bidding continued, and with each increase, Felicity felt her soul shrinking smaller and smaller. She had always known her stepfather despised her, especially after her mother died 2 years ago from consumption. But she never imagined he would stoop to this, selling her like a horse or a piece of furniture. The cruelty of it burned worse than the cold. $100. The new voice was different from the others, deeper and calmer, with a quality that made Felicity finally look up. The man who had spoken stood slightly apart from the other bidders. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair visible beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Snow had collected on his shoulders and the brim of his hat, but he didn't seem to notice. His face was partially obscured by a scarf wrapped around his neck and lower face, but his eyes were visible, a striking dark brown that caught the dim light from the nearby saloon. 100 going once, the auctioneer called out eagerly. Going twice. None of the other men spoke. $100 was a fortune, more than most cowboys made in 3 months of hard work. Sold to Dalton Thorne. Felicity felt her knees weaken. The man, this Dalton Thorne, climbed the steps to the platform with steady movements. Up close, she could see he was younger than she first thought, maybe 27 or 28. He pulled out a leather wallet and counted out the money to the auctioneer, who snatched it up greedily. "Pleasure doing business," the auctioneer said, already hurrying away to escape the cold. Felicity's stepfather had left the moment the bidding started, not even bothering to witness the final transaction. She was truly alone now, sold to a stranger in the middle of the worst storm Montana had seen in decades. Dalton Thorne turned to her, and she braced herself for whatever came next. Instead of grabbing her or making demands, he simply removed his heavy coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth that enveloped her was so sudden and shocking that tears sprang to her eyes. "Can you walk?" he asked. His voice was surprisingly gentle. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "My horse is just there. We need to get out of this weather before we both freeze to death." He led her down the steps, one hand lightly touching her elbow to steady her. His horse was a sturdy roan mare, already covered in a layer of snow. Dalton helped Felicity into the saddle, then mounted behind her. He wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her secure, then urged the horse forward into the blinding white. Felicity had no idea where they were going. She could barely see 5 feet in front of them. The wind screamed around them, and the cold bit into any exposed skin with vicious intensity. But the man behind her seemed to know exactly where he was headed, guiding the horse with practiced confidence. "Not much further," he said after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes. "Hold on." A dark shape emerged from the swirling snow. As they got closer, Felicity could see it was a small cabin, sturdy and well-built. Dalton dismounted and helped her down, then quickly led his horse into a lean-to structure attached to the cabin. He removed the saddle with efficient movements, threw a blanket over the mare, and made sure she had hay and water. Only then did he guide Felicity to the cabin door. The interior was dark until Dalton lit a lantern. Warm yellow light flooded the single room, revealing a simple but clean space. There was a potbelly stove in the center, a bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with supplies. It was sparse, but it looked like paradise compared to the frozen hell outside. Dalton immediately went to work starting a fire in the stove. Within minutes, blessed warmth began to spread through the room. Felicity stood by the door, still wearing his coat, unsure of what to do or say. She watched as he filled a pot with snow from a bucket by the door and set it on the stove to melt for water. "You should sit down," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs near the stove. "You need to warm up slowly or it will be painful." She did as he suggested, her movements stiff and awkward. Now that they were out of the immediate danger of the storm, reality was crashing down on her. This man had bought her. She was his property now, legally and completely. What would he expect from her? What would he demand? As if reading her thoughts, Dalton pulled the other chair around so he could sit facing her. He had removed his hat and scarf, and she could see his face clearly for the first time. He had strong features, a straight nose and a firm jawline covered with a few days of stubble. But it was his eyes that struck her most, warm and kind, with small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often. "My name is Dalton Thorne," he said. "I own a cattle ranch about 10 miles from here, though with this storm, it might as well be 100. This cabin is one of several lined shacks on my property. Cowboys use them during cattle drives or when they are working far from the main house." Felicity nodded, still not speaking. "I know this situation is not what anyone would want," he continued carefully. "What your stepfather did was wrong. No person should be sold like that, no matter what the law says about debts or property." "Then why did you buy me?" The words burst out of her before she could stop them. Her voice was hoarse and rough. Dalton's expression grew serious. "Because if I didn't, one of those other men would have. And I know their reputations. They would have hurt you." The simple honesty of his words struck her deeply. She had seen the way the other bidders looked at her, the hunger and cruelty in their eyes. She dropped her gaze to her hands, which were slowly regaining feeling in the warmth of the cabin. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Nothing that you are not willing to give," Dalton said firmly. "You are not my slave and you are not my property, no matter what that piece of paper says. You are a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." Felicity looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. But she saw only earnestness and something that might have been anger, though not directed at her. "I do not understand," she said. "You paid $100 for me. That is more money than most people see in a year." "I know." He ran a hand through his dark hair, making it stick up in several directions. "Here is what I propose. This storm is going to last several more days according to the signs. We are stuck here together until it passes. During that time, you can rest, eat, and recover from what you have been through. When the weather clears, I will take you to my ranch. You can work there as a housekeeper if you want, with fair wages and your own room. Or if you prefer, I will give you enough money to go wherever you want to start a new life. The choice is entirely yours. You would do that." Felicity could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Just let me go." "I would, though I hope you will consider staying at least for a while." My ranch is doing well, and I could use help managing the household. My current situation is rather chaotic, I will admit. I am better with cattle than I am with cooking and keeping things organized." A strange feeling was building in Felicity's chest, something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. This man, this stranger who had bought her in the middle of a blizzard, was offering her something she never thought she would have again, a choice. "I will think about it," she said quietly. "That is all I ask." Dalton stood and moved to the shelves, pulling down various items. "For now, let us focus on immediate needs. You need food and warm clothes. I have some extra things here that might fit you well enough." He handed her a flannel shirt and a pair of wool pants, both far too large but clean and dry. Then he turned his back to give her privacy while she changed. Felicity quickly stripped out of her thin, damp dress and pulled on the borrowed clothes. They swam on her small frame, but they were wonderfully warm and soft. "I am decent," she said, and Dalton turned back around. A small smile crossed his face. "You look like you are wearing a tent." Despite everything, Felicity felt her own lips twitch in response. "It is better than freezing." True enough. He began preparing a meal, pulling out salt pork, beans, and hardtack. "It is not fancy, but it will fill your belly." As he cooked, Felicity found herself studying him more carefully. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to taking care of himself. His hands were calloused and scarred from hard work, but his movements were gentle as he prepared the food. He hummed quietly to himself, a tune she did not recognize but found oddly comforting. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, surprising herself by initiating conversation. "About 5 years now," Dalton replied, stirring the pot of beans. "I worked as a cowboy for a decade, saving every penny I could. When old man Henderson decided to sell his spread, I had just enough to make an offer. It was not much at first, just a small herd and some run-down buildings. But I have been building it up slowly. I now have about 500 head of cattle and 3 men who work for me year-round." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It is. But it is my work, my land, my future. That means something." He glanced at her. "What about you? Where are you from originally?" Felicity hesitated, then decided there was no harm in answering. They were trapped together in this cabin anyway. "I was born in Ohio. My father was a farmer, but he died when I was 12. My mother remarried a year later to a man named Victor Carson. He worked as a clerk in town. We moved to Montana 3 years ago because he said there were better opportunities here. My mother died 2 years ago, and after that." She trailed off, the memories too painful to voice. "After that, he treated you poorly," Dalton finished quietly. "Yes, he blamed me for everything. For the cost of feeding me, for the space I took up, for still being alive when my mother was dead. I tried to be useful, to earn my keep, but nothing was ever good enough. Last week, he told me he had gambling debts and needed money quickly. I never imagined he would." She could not finish the sentence. "You never imagined he would sell you." Dalton's voice was hard now, angry on her behalf. "The man is a coward and a criminal, no matter what the law says about guardianship and debts." They fell silent as Dalton finished preparing the meal. He served her a generous portion, then took a smaller amount for himself. The food was simple but hot and filling. Felicity realized she had not eaten since yesterday morning. She cleaned her plate quickly, and without a word, Dalton refilled it. "Thank you," she said softly. "You do not need to thank me for basic human decency." But she did need to thank him, because basic human decency had been in short supply in her life lately. This stranger had shown her more kindness in a few hours than her stepfather had in years. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and snow piled up against the cabin walls. The temperature inside remained comfortable thanks to the stove, which Dalton fed regularly. As the evening wore on, exhaustion began to creep over Felicity. The events of the day, combined with the warmth and food, made her eyelids heavy. "You should sleep," Dalton said, noticing her struggling to keep her eyes open. "Take the bed, I will sleep in the chair." "That is not fair," Felicity protested. "This is your cabin, and you are my guest." His tone left no room for argument. "Besides, I have slept in worse places than a chair, believe me. As a cowboy, I spent many nights on the cold ground with nothing but a saddle for a pillow." Too tired to argue further, Felicity moved to the narrow bed. It was not much, just a wooden frame with a thin mattress and a couple of wool blankets, but it felt like luxury. She lay down fully clothed and pulled the blankets up to her chin. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Dalton settling into the chair by the stove, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his head tilted back against the wall. She woke once during the night, disoriented and frightened until she remembered where she was. The cabin was dark except for the faint glow from the stove. She could hear Dalton's steady breathing from across the room, a strangely comforting sound. For the first time in months, she felt safe. It was such a foreign feeling that tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. She fell back asleep, thinking about the cowboy who had bought her freedom instead of her servitude. The storm raged for 3 more days. During that time, Felicity and Dalton fell into an easy routine. He would wake first and restart the fire, then prepare a simple breakfast. They would eat together, talking about small things. He told her about his ranch, about the cattle drives and the hard work of building something from nothing. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her father teaching her to read, and her mother showing her how to make bread that rose perfectly every time. They carefully avoided talking about the auction, or what would happen when the storm ended. It was as if they had created a small bubble of normalcy in the midst of chaos, and neither wanted to pop it just yet. On the second day, Felicity insisted on taking over the cooking. "You said you needed a housekeeper," she pointed out. "Let me show you I can actually cook something besides beans and salt pork." Dalton laughed and surrendered the cooking area. With the limited supplies available, Felicity could not work miracles, but she managed to make the food more appetizing. She fried the salt pork until it was crispy, made a gravy to go with the hardtack, and even managed a simple pudding using some dried fruit she found in the stores. "This is delicious," Dalton said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "If this is what you can do with line shack rations, I cannot wait to see what you can make with a fully stocked kitchen." The compliment warmed her more than the stove. It had been so long since anyone appreciated her efforts or praised her skills. She found herself smiling more, laughing at Dalton's stories about stubborn cattle and mishaps on the range. On the third day, the storm began to ease. The wind died down, and the snow fell more gently. They could finally see more than a few feet out the window. The world had been transformed into a pristine white landscape, beautiful and deadly. The snow was several feet deep in places, drifted by the powerful winds. "The main storm has passed, but it will be at least another day before the trails are passable," Dalton said, standing by the window. "Even then, it is going to be slow going." Felicity joined him at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance between them. Over the past few days, she had become acutely aware of Dalton's physical presence, the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, the sound of his laugh, deep and genuine, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. She was developing feelings for him, dangerous feelings that she tried hard to suppress. He had made it clear he expected nothing from her, and she did not want to complicate their arrangement with unwanted emotions. but it was getting harder to ignore the way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, the way she felt safe and protected in his presence, the way she caught herself watching him when she thought he was not paying attention. "Felicity," Dalton said quietly, still looking out at the snow, "I want you to know that my offer stands. When we get to the ranch, you can choose what you want to do. Stay or go, the decision is yours." "What if I want to stay?" The words were out before she could stop them. He turned to look at her, surprise evident on his face. "Then I would be very glad, but I want you to be sure. Do not choose to stay because you feel obligated or because you think you have no other options. Choose it because it is what you truly want." "How can I know what I truly want?" Felicity asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "A week ago, I thought my life was over. Then you came along and showed me kindness when you had no reason to. You have been nothing but respectful and generous. But I do not know if what I am feeling is gratitude or something more. I do not know if I am thinking clearly or if I am just clinging to the first person who treated me like a human being." Dalton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Those are fair questions, and they deserve honest answers which only time can provide. So here is my suggestion. Come to the ranch as my housekeeper with wages and your own space. Take time to figure out what you want, who you are when you are not in survival mode. If after some time has passed, you decide you want to leave, I will help you. If you decide to stay, then we can discuss what that looks like." "And what do you want?" Felicity asked boldly, looking up at him. A flash of something passed through Dalton's eyes, too quick for her to identify. "What I want is not important right now. You have been through a trauma, and you deserve time to heal without pressure from me or anyone else." It was a kind answer, a respectful answer, but Felicity could not help feeling a pang of disappointment. Did that mean he did not see her as anything more than an obligation? Or was he simply being honorable, giving her space when she needed it most? The fourth day dawned clear and cold, with a brilliant blue sky that hurt to look at. The sun reflecting off the snow was blindingly bright. Dalton announced they would attempt the journey to the ranch. "It is going to take most of the day," he warned. "The snow is deep, and we will have to go slowly. But the weather should hold, and I want to get us to a place with more supplies and comfort." They prepared carefully, bundling up in every warm item they could find. Dalton packed up the essential supplies from the cabin, loading them onto his horse. Felicity wore layers of his extra clothes under his heavy coat. She looked ridiculous, but she was warm. The journey was every bit as difficult as Dalton predicted. The horse struggled through the deep snow, and several times they had to dismount and lead her around particularly bad drifts. The cold was intense but manageable as long as they kept moving. Dalton frequently checked on Felicity, making sure she was not getting frostbite on her fingers or toes. They stopped once to rest and share some food and water. Sitting on a fallen log that was barely visible above the snow line, they looked out over the transformed landscape. Montana was beautiful in the winter, all whites and grays and pale blues, vast and empty and somehow peaceful despite its danger. "It must be hard, ranching in country like this," Felicity observed. "It has its challenges," Dalton agreed. "The winters can be brutal. We lose cattle every year to cold and starvation. But there is something about this land that gets into your blood. The way it is wild and untamed, the way it makes you work for every success. It builds character, my father used to say." "Your father was a rancher too?" "No, actually. He was a shopkeeper in Kansas. But he had dreams of the West, of open spaces and opportunity. He died before he could make it out here. I like to think he would be proud of what I have built." "I am sure he would be." They pressed on, and as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, a collection of buildings came into view. The ranch was larger than Felicity expected. There was a main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals, and various other outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, a welcoming sign of warmth and life. As they rode into the yard, 3 men emerged from the barn. They all looked surprised to see Dalton and even more surprised to see Felicity. "Boss, we were starting to worry," one of them called out. He was older, probably in his 50s, with gray streaking his beard. "When that storm hit and you did not come back, we figured you had holed up somewhere." "I was at the West Line shack," Dalton said, dismounting. He helped Felicity down, then turned to his men. "This is Miss Felicity Carson. She will be working as the housekeeper here at the ranch. Felicity, these are my men, Jack Morrison, Pete Williams, and young Samuel Hart." The 3 cowboys tipped their hats politely. Jack, the older man who had spoken first, smiled warmly. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Carson. A housekeeper will be a welcome addition. No offense, boss, but the place has been getting a bit rough around the edges." "None taken," Dalton said dryly. "Now, let us get the horse taken care of and get inside before we all freeze." The interior of the main house was even better than Felicity hoped. The front door opened into a large living area with a massive stone fireplace. Beyond that was a good-sized kitchen with a modern cast-iron stove and plenty of counter space. There were 3 bedrooms, one clearly Dalton's and 2 that looked unused except for storage. "The room on the left will be yours," Dalton said, carrying her small bundle of possessions. "It is not much right now, but we can get you proper furnishings and whatever else you need when the weather permits travel to town." Felicity walked into the room and looked around. It had a window facing east, a simple bed, a dresser, and a chair. Compared to the tiny, cold attic space she had occupied in her stepfather's house, it was palatial. "It is perfect," she said honestly. "Good. Now, why don't you rest and get settled? I need to talk to the men and check on the herd. We can discuss your duties and wages over dinner." Left alone, Felicity sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. Less than a week ago, she had been sold like property in the middle of a blizzard. Now she was in a comfortable room in a ranch house, employed as a housekeeper by a man who seemed determined to treat her with dignity and respect. It was almost too much to believe, but it was real. The bed beneath her was solid. The warm air coming from the heating vent was genuine. And the flutter in her chest when she thought about Dalton was all too real as well. She needed to be careful. Dalton had made it clear he had no expectations beyond hiring a housekeeper. She could not let herself mistake his kindness for romantic interest. It would only lead to heartbreak, and she had experienced enough pain for one lifetime. Resolved to keep her growing feelings in check, Felicity unpacked her few belongings and then went to explore the kitchen. If she was going to be the housekeeper, she might as well start earning her wages. She found the pantry well stocked with basics, though it was clear no one had been doing much elaborate cooking. There was flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, canned vegetables, and a good supply of preserved meats. She decided to make a proper dinner. Searching through the supplies, she found everything she needed for a beef stew with dumplings, using some of the canned vegetables and dried beef. As she worked, she felt herself relaxing. Cooking had always been a comfort to her, a way to create something good and nourishing from simple ingredients. She was just putting the dumplings on top of the stew when Dalton came back inside, stamping snow off his boots. He stopped when he saw the activity in the kitchen, and a broad smile spread across his face. "Something smells incredible." "It is just stew," Felicity said, trying to downplay the pleasure his praise gave her. It will be ready in about 20 minutes. Perfect. That gives me time to wash up and change into clean clothes. He paused. Did you invite the men to eat with us? They usually take meals in the bunkhouse, but you made enough for a small army by the looks of it. I was not sure what the arrangement was, Felicity admitted. I made extra just in case. Let us have them join us tonight as a welcome dinner. In the future, you can decide. Some housekeepers prefer to prepare food that the men take back to the bunkhouse. Others do not mind setting a larger table. It is up to you. I do not mind cooking for everyone, Felicity said, as long as they do not mind eating at whatever time I have it ready. I am sure they will adjust their schedules happily for home-cooked meals. Dinner that evening was a lively affair. The three ranch hands were respectful and friendly, clearly pleased to have good food and pleasant company. They shared stories about the ranch and the challenges of the recent storm. Several cattle had been lost, but the number was lower than feared. The men had worked hard to get the rest of the herd into sheltered areas before the worst of the weather hit. Felicity found herself laughing at their tales, especially young Samuel's story about a stubborn bull who led him on a chase across half the property. Samuel was only 19, with an earnest face and an easy smile. Pete was in his mid-30s, quiet but kind. Jack, the oldest, had a fatherly air that made Felicity feel instantly comfortable. "This is the best meal I have had in months, Miss Carson," Jack said, helping himself to a third serving. "If you cook like this regularly, we are all going to get fat and happy." "I will do my best," Felicity promised. After dinner, the men helped clear the table before heading back to the bunkhouse. Dalton and Felicity cleaned up the kitchen together, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying. "You were right about one thing," Dalton said as he dried the last pot. "You are an excellent cook." "Thank you. It is something I actually enjoy doing when I am cooking for people who appreciate it. That would be all of us here." He hung up the towel and leaned against the counter. "Now, we should discuss your wages and expectations. I was thinking $30 a month plus room and board. Your duties would include cooking, cleaning, and general household management. If that seems fair to you." Felicity nearly gasped. $30 a month was generous, far more than most housekeepers made. "That is very fair, more than fair." "Good. You will have Sundays off, and I expect you to take time for yourself each day. I do not want you working from dawn until midnight. This is a job, not an indenture." "I appreciate that." She hesitated, then asked, "Dalton, why are you being so kind to me?" "You have already done so much, and now you are paying me more than necessary. I do not understand." He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My mother was in a situation similar to yours once," he finally said. "When she was 19, her father sold her to pay off gambling debts. The man who bought her was cruel. He worked her like a slave and beat her when she did not meet his impossible standards. She finally escaped after 2 years, running away in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back. How did she survive? My father found her half frozen on the side of the road. He took her in, gave her food and shelter, and asked nothing in return. When she recovered, she chose to stay. They fell in love and got married 6 months later. I was born a year after that." His voice was soft with memory. "My father died when I was 10 and my mother when I was 16. But before she passed, she made me promise something. She made me promise that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way my father helped her, I would do it. She made me promise to always treat people with dignity, especially those who have been stripped of theirs." Tears welled up in Felicity's eyes. "I am sorry you lost them. So am I. But their love story, the way they built a life together based on respect and partnership, that is what I want for myself someday. That is the example they set for me." He looked at her directly. So to answer your question, I am kind to you because you deserve kindness. Because another man's cruelty does not obligate you to anything, and because I believe in giving people a chance to build the life they want, not the life circumstances force upon them. Felicity wiped her eyes. Your parents would be proud of the man you have become. I hope so. Now, you have had a long few days. You should get some rest. Tomorrow you can explore the place properly and figure out how you want to organize things. Felicity said good night and retreated to her room, but sleep was a long time coming. She lay in the comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Dalton had told her. His story about his parents was beautiful and tragic and hopeful all at once. It also explained so much about why he acted the way he did, but it also made her feelings for him more complicated. She was not just attracted to him physically, though she certainly was. She admired him deeply, respected the man he had chosen to become despite his losses, and that admiration was quickly turning into something deeper and more dangerous. She needed to focus on her work and on figuring out who she was beyond the trauma of the past few years. Romance could wait. It had to wait. The days turned into weeks, and winter slowly began to loosen its grip on Montana. The snow melted gradually, revealing brown grass and muddy ground. The ranch came to life with activity as Dalton and his men worked to assess the damage from the harsh winter and prepare for spring calving season. Felicity threw herself into her work. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, organized the pantry and storage areas, and cooked 3 solid meals a day. She mended clothes, did laundry, and even helped Jack tend to a cow that got injured on some barbed wire. The work was hard but satisfying. She felt useful and valued in a way she never had before. The ranch hands treated her with unfailing respect and courtesy. Jack often sought her opinion on various matters, from which medicine to use on a sick calf to whether his letter to his daughter back east sounded too preaky. Samuel brought her wildflowers when they started blooming in sheltered spots. Pete carved her a beautiful rolling pin from a piece of oak. And Dalton was a constant, steady presence. He worked harder than anyone, often coming in after dark covered in mud and exhaustion. But he always had a kind word and a smile for Felicity. They fell into a comfortable routine, often sitting by the fire in the evenings, talking about the day's events or reading from the small collection of books he owned. He was careful never to cross any boundaries, never to make her feel uncomfortable or pressured. He was the perfect gentleman, and Felicity was falling hopelessly in love with him. She tried to fight it, tried to remind herself that he was her employer and she was in his debt. But it was impossible to stop her heart from racing when he walked into a room. Impossible to prevent the warmth that spread through her when he praised her cooking or laughed at something she said. Impossible to ignore the longing she felt when she watched him with the animals, gentle and patient, and imagined what it would be like to be held in his strong arms. Spring arrived in full force, bringing with it longer days and warming temperatures. The ranch was a flurry of activity as calves were born, and the herd needed constant attention. Dalton hired 2 additional temporary hands to help with the workload. Felicity found herself cooking for 7 people 3 times a day, but she did not mind. The kitchen felt like her domain, and she took pride in sending the men out well-fed and ready for their demanding work. It was during this busy time that Felicity had her first trip back to Miles City since the auction. Dalton needed to buy supplies, and said she should come along to pick out anything she needed for the kitchen and for herself. The journey to town was pleasant on horseback now that the weather was nice. Dalton kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out various landmarks and telling stories about the history of the area. Felicity rode beside him on a gentle mare named Daisy that he had assigned as hers to use whenever she needed. Miles City looked completely different from the frozen nightmare she remembered. The streets were muddy but busy with activity. People went about their business, and the town had a prosperous, energetic feel to it. Still, Felicity felt her anxiety rise as they rode down the main street. The last time she was here, she had been standing on an auction block, terrified and alone. Dalton seemed to sense her discomfort. "We will make this quick," he said quietly. "Just get what we need and head back." They hitched their horses outside the general store and went inside. The proprietor, a round man with a jolly face, greeted them warmly. "Dalton, good to see you. How did the ranch fare through that terrible storm? Lost some cattle, but could have been much worse. I need to stock up on supplies." He gestured to Felicity. "This is Miss Carson, my housekeeper. She will be picking out what is needed for the kitchen." "Pleased to meet you, miss." The proprietor smiled. "Take your time looking around. If you need anything special ordered, just let me know." Felicity began selecting items, focusing on practical necessities, but also treating herself to a few small luxuries like cinnamon and vanilla extract. She was loading tins of baking powder into her basket when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Well, well. If it is not my ungrateful stepdaughter." She froze, every muscle in her body tensing. Slowly, she turned to face Victor Carson. He looked thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a sallow complexion. His clothes were rumpled and stained. "I have nothing to say to you," Felicity said, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to sound calm. "No, not even a thank you for taking you in all those years. For feeding and housing you." Victor's voice was bitter and slurred slightly. He had been drinking, she realized. "Thank you." Felicity felt anger rising to replace her fear. "You sold me like livestock. You could have let me go free after Mother died, but instead, you treated me like a burden and then sold me to pay your gambling debts." "I gave you to someone who could provide for you better than I could," Victor sneered. "Though from what I hear, you are just a servant now anyway, working for a living like common help." "That is exactly what I am doing," Felicity said, lifting her chin. "I am working for fair wages with dignity and respect. I am building a life for myself, no thanks to you." Before Victor could respond, Dalton appeared at Felicity's side. His presence was like a shield. "Is there a problem here?" Victor's sneer faltered when he saw Dalton's size and the look in his eyes. "No problem. Just talking to my former stepdaughter." "She does not look like she wants to talk to you," Dalton observed, his voice dangerously quiet. "And I know I do not want you bothering her." "You are the fool who paid $100 for her," Victor said, trying to regain his bravado. "Tell me, has she been worth it? Is she as obedient as promised?" Dalton moved so fast that Felicity barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Victor by the front of his shirt, lifting him slightly off the ground. "You will not speak about her that way. In fact, you will not speak to her or about her at all. If I hear you have been bothering her or spreading lies, I will make you regret it. Do we understand each other?" Victor nodded frantically, his face going pale. Dalton released him with a slight shove, and Victor stumbled backward, nearly falling. He shot them both a venomous look before scurrying out of the store. The proprietor, who had witnessed the whole exchange, shook his head. "That man has been nothing but trouble since he arrived in Miles City. Lost more money gambling in the past 6 months than most men make in 5 years. Do not worry, Dalton. Everyone in town knows what kind of man Victor Carson is." Felicity found her hands were shaking. The encounter had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. Dalton gently took the basket from her hands. "Let us finish up here and get back to the ranch," he said softly. She nodded mutely, following him as he completed their purchases. He paid for everything, including several items he insisted on buying for her. A new dress, a warm shawl, and a pair of sturdy boots. Felicity protested, but he waved off her objections. "Consider it a bonus for excellent work," he said. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Felicity was lost in her thoughts, processing the confrontation with her stepfather. Part of her felt empowered that she had stood up to him, but another part felt shaken and vulnerable. "Are you all right?" Dalton asked when they were about halfway home. "I think so," Felicity said. Seeing him again brought back a lot of difficult memories, but I also felt something I did not expect. What was that? Pity. He looked so pathetic and angry and lost. I realized that he has nothing. He sold the one person who might have cared about him for money to fuel his addiction. Now he is alone, and it is his own fault. She looked over at Dalton. "Thank you for standing up for me. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Dalton said firmly. "No one gets to treat you that way, especially not someone who was supposed to protect you." The intensity in his voice made Felicity's heart skip. She wanted to say something, to express the depth of her gratitude and the growing love she felt for him. But the words stuck in her throat. What if she misread his kindness? What if her feelings were not reciprocated? They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence. When they arrived at the ranch, Dalton helped her unload the supplies. His hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary when he handed her a package. Their eyes met, and Felicity saw something in his gaze that made her breath catch. But then he stepped back, the moment passing. "I should go check on the men," he said, his voice slightly rough. "See how things went today." He left quickly, almost as if he was fleeing. Felicity stood in the kitchen, packages scattered around her, wondering if she had imagined the look in his eyes. That night, she could not sleep. She tossed and turned, thinking about Dalton, about the way he had defended her, about the moment when their hands touched. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen to make herself some warm milk. She was standing by the stove, waiting for the milk to heat, when Dalton appeared in the doorway. He wore only his pants and an undershirt, his feet bare and his hair tousled from sleep. "I heard someone moving around," he said. "Could not sleep." "No, too many thoughts." She gestured to the pot. "Would you like some warm milk, please?" She poured 2 cups, and they sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet around them, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. The intimacy of the moment, sitting together in their nightclothes in the soft lamplight, was almost overwhelming. "Felicity," Dalton said after a long silence, "I need to tell you something, and I do not want you to feel pressured by it in any way." Her heart began to pound. "All right." He took a deep breath. "When I bought you at that auction, I told myself I was just doing the right thing, helping someone who needed help, like my father helped my mother. And that was true. But over these past months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and kindness and resilience, I have developed feelings that go beyond simple respect or friendship." Felicity's cup rattled slightly against the saucer as she set it down. "What kind of feelings?" "The kind that make me look forward to coming in from work, because I know you will be here. The kind that make me want to protect you from anything that might hurt you. The kind that make me imagine a future that includes more than just employer and employee." He looked at her directly, his dark eyes intense. "I am falling in love with you, Felicity. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you on that platform, so brave and scared and determined not to break." Tears spilled down Felicity's cheeks. "I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I have been trying so hard not to love you, because I thought it was just gratitude or dependence. But it is more than that. I love the way you treat everyone with respect. I love your laugh and your stories and the way you are so gentle with the animals." I love that you see me as a person, not property or a burden. I love you, Dalton. I think I started loving you the moment you put your coat around my shoulders in the middle of that blizzard." Dalton stood and came around the table. He knelt beside her chair and took her hands in his. "I do not want to rush you into anything. We can take as much time as you need." "I have had time," Felicity said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have had months to see who you really are, and what I see is the man I want to spend my life with." He reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "Then maybe we can start courting properly. I can take you on buggy rides and picnics. I can bring you flowers and write you terrible poetry." She laughed through her tears. "I would like that very much. And someday, when you are ready, I would like to ask you to be my wife. Not because I bought you, but because you chose me freely." "I already choose you," Felicity whispered. Dalton stood, drawing her up with him. He cupped her face in his calloused hands and looked at her with such tenderness that her heart felt like it might burst. "May I kiss you?" "Yes." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but she did not want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him with every fiber of her being. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect. The kiss was a promise and a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "I will court you properly," he said. "I will do this right, but I want you to know that I am committed to you, to us, for however long you will have me." "Forever sounds like a good start," Felicity said. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows. Outside, the ranch was waking up. There was work to be done, cattle to tend, and a life to build. But for this moment, there was only the two of them and the love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. The following months were the happiest of Felicity's life. True to his word, Dalton courted her properly. He took her on buggy rides through the countryside, showing her the beauty of Montana in the summer. They had picnics by the creek that ran through the property. He brought her flowers, not just wildflowers from the fields, but occasionally a carefully tended rose from the bush that grew by the side of the house. He also included her in the running of the ranch, asking her opinion on decisions and explaining the business side of cattle ranching. Felicity found she had a knack for the bookkeeping and organization that Dalton admitted he found tedious. Together, they made a good team. The ranch hands were delighted by the developing romance. Jack told Felicity privately that he had never seen Dalton so happy. Samuel asked for courting advice, having developed an interest in a girl in town. Pete carved them a beautiful wooden box to keep special mementos in. Summer passed into fall, and with the changing season came a growing sense of anticipation. Felicity knew that Dalton was planning to propose. She could see it in the way he sometimes looked at her, a mixture of love and nervous excitement. She was ready to say yes, more than ready. But she wanted him to do it in his own time, when the moment felt right to him. The proposal came on a crisp October evening. They had ridden out to watch the sunset from a high ridge on the property. The view was spectacular, the sky painted in oranges and pinks and purples, the land stretching out below them in shades of gold and brown. "Felicity," Dalton said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "I have been thinking about this moment for months, planning what I would say. But now that we are here, all my prepared words have fled." She smiled, taking his hands. "Then just speak from your heart." "I love you," he said simply. "I love everything about you. Your strength, your kindness, your terrible jokes, and your beautiful laugh. I love the way you hum while you cook, and the way you always put sugar in my coffee without me asking, because you know that is how I like it. I love that you have made my house a home and my life complete." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold band with a small but beautiful diamond. This was my mother's ring. My father saved for 2 years to buy it for her. She told me before she died that I should give it to the woman I love when I find her. I found her, Felicity. I found you. Will you marry me? Yes, Felicity said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Dalton slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the passion and love he had been holding back during their courtship. The kiss was deep and claiming, a promise of all the days and nights to come. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. When? Dalton asked. When can we get married? I do not want to wait long. Neither do I, Felicity admitted. But we should give people enough time to make arrangements. What about next month, a November wedding? Perfect. We can have the ceremony here at the ranch. Nothing fancy, just our friends and neighbors. What matters is that we are together. They were married on a clear November day, almost exactly a year after Dalton had bought her at the auction. The ceremony was held in the main room of the ranch house, decorated with evergreen boughs and late-season wildflowers. Jack gave Felicity away, tears running down his weathered face. The local minister performed the ceremony, and Pete and Samuel stood up as Dalton's witnesses. Felicity wore a simple but beautiful dress that she and Dalton had picked out together on a trip to town. It was cream-colored with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She wore her hair down, something Dalton had requested, with a few flowers woven into it. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Dalton kissed her, the assembled guests cheered. It was a small gathering, maybe 20 people in total, but every single one of them was genuinely happy for the couple. The celebration that followed was warm and joyful. There was music, with Jack surprising everyone by pulling out a fiddle and playing beautifully. There was dancing, with Dalton sweeping Felicity around the cleared space while everyone clapped in time. There was food, more than could possibly be eaten, brought by the neighboring ranchers and their families. And there was happiness, genuine and abundant, filling every corner of the house. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Felicity found herself standing by the window, watching the stars come out. Dalton came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "A year ago I thought my life was over. I never imagined I could be this happy, this loved." "You deserve all of this and more," Dalton said, turning her around to face him. "You are the strongest, most amazing woman I have ever known. And I get to spend the rest of my life with you." He kissed her again, slowly and thoroughly. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. "Shall we say good night to the last of our guests and retire, Mrs. Thorne?" The sound of her new name sent a shiver of pleasure through her. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, I think we shall." Their wedding night was everything Felicity had dreamed of and more. Dalton was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished. He took his time, learning what pleased her, showing her without words how much he loved her. And when they finally came together fully, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Two people who loved each other completely joining in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed that was now theirs, not just his. Dalton traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and Felicity felt more content than she ever had in her life. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Dalton asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "For seeing me when I was invisible. For treating me like I mattered when everyone else saw me as worthless. For loving me. Felicity, you were never invisible to me. From the moment I saw you, I saw your strength and your courage, and loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, the first night of their married life together. The first year of their marriage passed quickly, filled with hard work and deep happiness. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, running the ranch together. Felicity continued to manage the household, but now she also helped with the business side, keeping the books and handling correspondence. Dalton valued her input and often sought her advice on major decisions. The ranch continued to prosper. They were able to hire another permanent hand and expand the herd. Dalton built a new barn and repaired several of the outbuildings. He also made improvements to the main house, adding a proper bathing room and expanding the kitchen to make Felicity's work easier. But the best news came in the spring, when Felicity realized she was pregnant. She told Dalton one evening after dinner, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. They had talked about wanting children, but she still did not know exactly how he would react to the reality of it. She need not have worried. Dalton's face lit up with pure joy. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her down, suddenly worried about being too rough. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "I am going to be a father." "And I am going to be a mother," Felicity said, her own voice full of emotion. "Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He knelt down and pressed a gentle kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one. Your mother and I cannot wait to meet you." Felicity ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Both of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Felicity continued to work, though Dalton insisted she take things easier and let him handle more of the physical tasks. He was attentive and protective without being overbearing, always making sure she had everything she needed. The ranch hands were thrilled about the coming baby. Jack took to making a beautiful wooden cradle in his spare time. Pete carved a collection of small animals that would serve as toys. Samuel, who had gotten married himself that spring to his sweetheart from town, shared stories and advice from his wife about what to expect. As Felicity's belly grew, she and Dalton spent many evenings talking about their hopes and dreams for their child. They chose names, both boy and girl options. They discussed how they wanted to raise their children, what values they wanted to instill. They talked about expanding the house to add more bedrooms for the children they hope to have. "I want our children to grow up knowing they are loved," Felicity said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I want them to feel safe and valued, not like burdens." "They will," Dalton promised, his hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "We will make sure of it. Our children will grow up knowing that they are the best things that ever happened to us." The baby came on a cold December night, almost 2 years to the day after Dalton had bought Felicity at the auction. The labor was long and difficult, but Felicity was strong, and she had the town's midwife and doctor with her, along with Dalton, who refused to leave her side despite the traditional custom of men staying out of the birthing room. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Felicity cried with relief and joy. Dalton held the baby with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." They named him Daniel Carson Thorne, honoring the family name Felicity had kept from her mother while giving him Dalton's surname. Little Daniel had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. He was healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs that he used frequently in his first weeks of life. Adjusting to life with a newborn was challenging but rewarding. Felicity found that, despite the sleepless nights and constant demands, she loved being a mother. And Dalton was a devoted father, helping with everything from diaper changes to midnight feedings. He would walk the floor with Daniel for hours when the baby was fussy, singing softly or telling stories. As Daniel grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Dalton's hard work and smart decisions had turned his small operation into one of the most successful ranches in the region. They were able to save money and reinvest in the property, improving their breeding stock and expanding their grazing lands. When Daniel was 2 years old, Felicity became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and she delivered a healthy baby girl on a warm June evening. They named her Margaret Rose Thorne, though she quickly became Maggie to everyone who knew her. She was smaller than Daniel had been, with fine blonde hair and her father's warm brown eyes. Life on the ranch settled into a happy rhythm. The children grew, healthy and loved. Daniel was adventurous and bold, always eager to follow his father around and help with the ranch work. Maggie was quieter but observant, with a creative streak that led her to spend hours drawing and making up elaborate stories. Felicity and Dalton watched their children grow with pride and joy. They were careful to raise them with the values they believed in: hard work, honesty, kindness, and respect for all people regardless of their station in life. They told their children stories, including eventually the story of how they met, though they saved the full details for when the children were older. 3 years after Maggie was born, Felicity gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named David and Deanna. The twins were a handful, keeping both parents constantly busy, but they were also a blessing, filling the house with laughter and noise and love. Jack, who had become like a grandfather to the children, announced his retirement when the twins were born. "I am getting too old for this work," he said, though his eyes were bright with affection as he watched the 4 children playing in the yard. "But I am not going far. I am going to build myself a little place on the edge of your property, if that is all right. Someone needs to keep an eye on this brood." "We would love that," Felicity said, hugging the old cowboy. "You are family, Jack. You always will be." True to his word, Jack built a small cabin on the ranch and became a fixture in the children's lives. He taught them to ride and rope, told them stories, and provided an extra set of hands when Felicity needed help managing the energetic group. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy days. The ranch prospered beyond even Dalton's ambitious dreams. They expanded several times, eventually owning over 3,000 acres and running a herd of more than 2,000 cattle. They hired a manager to oversee the day-to-day operations, allowing Dalton more time with his family. Felicity had long since stopped working as a traditional housekeeper. She now managed the household with the help of hired staff, and she focused her energy on raising the children and helping Dalton with the business aspects of the ranch. She discovered she had a talent for business, and several of the ranch's most profitable ventures were her ideas. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Felicity with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time they had left the ranch for more than a day or two since they married. Jack and the staff took care of the children, and Dalton and Felicity spent 2 weeks enjoying the city, attending the theater, dining in fine restaurants, and simply being together without the constant demands of ranch life. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront watching the ships in the harbor, Dalton pulled Felicity close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Do you ever wonder what your life might have been like if that day had never happened?" Felicity looked up at him, seeing the worry in his eyes. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "Never. Not for a single moment. That day was the worst day of my life, but it led to everything good that came after. It led to you, to our children, to the life we have built together. I would not change a single thing." "I love you," Dalton said, kissing her deeply. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you. You saved me, Dalton. You saw value in me when no one else did. You gave me a future when I had none. But more than that, you gave me love. Real, honest, lasting love. That is the greatest gift anyone could give. They stood there on the waterfront, holding each other as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. Two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built a life filled with light. When they returned to the ranch, they were greeted with chaos. The children had been good for Jack, but they had also been energetic and mischievous. The house was still standing, but there were several stories that needed to be told about near disasters and creative problem solving. Felicity and Dalton listened to the tales with amusement, thanking Jack profusely for his efforts. That night, after the children were finally all asleep, they sat on the porch together, looking out over the land they had built their life on. "This is what I always dreamed of," Dalton said quietly. "A family, a home, a legacy to leave behind. But it is better than I ever imagined because I am sharing it with you." "We have been so blessed," Felicity agreed. "From such a terrible beginning, we have built something beautiful." The years continued to pass. The children grew into young adults, each with their own personalities and dreams. Daniel followed his father into ranching, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. Maggie discovered a love of teaching and opened a school for children in the area. The twins, inseparable as always, announced their intention to attend college back east, with David wanting to study law and Deanna interested in medicine. Felicity and Dalton supported all their children's dreams, even when it meant letting them leave the ranch to pursue their own paths. It was hard to watch them go, but it was also deeply satisfying to see them become independent, capable adults who were making their own way in the world. As Dalton and Felicity grew older, they spent more time simply enjoying each other's company. They took long rides across the ranch, remembering the early days when it was just the two of them and 3 cowboys trying to make a go of it. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains. They welcomed grandchildren as their children started families of their own. Daniel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and they had 3 children who loved spending time with their grandparents. Maggie married a teacher from back east and had 2 daughters who were as bright and creative as their mother. The twins both married, though they chose to stay in the east where they had built their careers. Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 85. His funeral was attended by half the county, a testament to the respect and affection people felt for him. Felicity and Dalton mourned him deeply, knowing that he had been instrumental in their happiness from the very beginning. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Dalton stood and raised a glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice still strong despite the silver in his hair. 30 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She came into my life during a storm, bringing light and love to places I did not even know were dark." He looked at Felicity, his eyes still full of the love he had felt from the beginning. "You have given me everything: a home, a family, a purpose. You have been my partner in all things, my best friend, and the love of my life. Here is to 30 more years if we are lucky enough to have them, and if not, then I am grateful for every single day I have spent with you." Felicity stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him while their family cheered. "To us," she said when she pulled away, "to the life we built from nothing, to love that endured and grew stronger with each passing year." They did get several more years together. Years filled with watching their grandchildren grow, enjoying the success of the ranch, and savoring the simple pleasure of growing old with someone you love. They took care of each other through the inevitable health challenges that came with age. They continued to tell their story to anyone who would listen, wanting people to know that even from the darkest beginnings, beauty could grow. Dalton died peacefully at the age of 78, with Felicity holding his hand. His last words to her were simple: "Thank you for choosing me." Felicity mourned him deeply, but she also celebrated the life they had shared. At his funeral, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, she told their story one more time. She told them about the winter storm, about the auction, about the man who had bought her not to own her but to free her. She told them about the love that grew from respect and kindness, about the family they built together, about the legacy they were leaving behind. Felicity lived another 5 years after Dalton passed. She remained sharp and engaged, spending her time with family and working on her memoirs. She wanted to make sure their story was recorded accurately, that future generations would know about the love that changed both their lives. She died quietly in her sleep at the age of 82, with her children around her. In her hand was a photograph taken on their wedding day, showing a young couple looking at each other with such love and hope that it transcended the old, faded paper. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with a simple stone that read, "Dalton and Felicity Thorne, partners, parents, proof that love can grow anywhere." The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, passing down through the generations. The main house was preserved and expanded, becoming a family home where multiple generations lived and worked together. And always, in the living room, hung a large painting of Dalton and Felicity in their prime, a reminder of the love story that started it all. Their story became a legend in Miles City and the surrounding areas. People would point out the ranch as they passed and tell their children about the woman who was sold during the worst winter storm, the cowboy who bought her and built her a future, and the love that grew from such an unlikely beginning. It was a story of survival and hope, of kindness and courage, of two people who found each other in the darkest of times and chose to build something beautiful together. It was a story that reminded people that even when circumstances seem insurmountable, love can light the way forward. And it was a story that lived on long after Dalton and Felicity were gone, inspiring generations to treat each other with dignity, to see value in every person, and to believe that love, real lasting love, is always worth fighting for. The ranch stood as a monument to their legacy, but their true legacy was in the family they raised, the values they instilled, and the love they showed each other every single day of their lives together. From a transaction born of cruelty and desperation came a love story for the ages, proof that the human spirit can triumph over any adversity when we choose compassion over cruelty, love over hate, and hope over despair. And so their story ended not with tragedy but with triumph, not with bitterness but with sweetness, not with regret but with gratitude for a life well lived and a love well earned. Dalton Thorne had bought Felicity Carson on the worst day of her life, but what he really gave her was so much more than freedom. He gave her a home, a family, a purpose, and most importantly, a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. And Felicity, in turn, gave him the same. Together, they proved that love can grow anywhere, even in the middle of a Montana blizzard, even from the most unlikely of beginnings. Their love story was complete, their legacy secure, their future built not just for themselves but for all the generations that would follow. And in the end, that was the most beautiful thing of all.